A quarter acre is 10,190 square feet, roughly 2 basketball courts side by side. Most people stand on a lot that size and see a lawn, a swing set, and an excuse. When we get real land, then we'll start. That's what most people tell themselves. They are dead wrong about that, and the numbers prove it clearly. Right now, families on quarter-acre lots are pulling over 9,000 eggs a year off that exact footprint. 150 pounds of meat and most of their vegetables come from that same small lot. Meanwhile, the folks waiting for 20 acres are still watching videos about it. The land was never the problem. The way you were taught to use it is. Today, we prove that square foot by square foot, system by system. By the end of this video, you'll have the complete quarter-acre blueprint. 5 systems, the exact animals, the real production numbers, and the layout that makes it feed itself. You'll know where every bed, bird, and bin goes, and exactly why it goes there. Stay till the end, and I'll show you the one mistake that quietly kills more small homesteads than predators, weather, and weeds combined. Miss that one mistake, and nothing else in this video matters. Here's what's actually happening on most small lots right now. 6 chickens in a coop in the corner. Cute coop, Pinterest worthy. Those 6 birds are eating about 11 50-pound bags of layer pellets a year. At $20 a bag, that's $220 spent on eggs you could buy cheaper at the store. A garden that produces tomatoes for 8 glorious weeks, then sits empty from October to May. A monument to your optimism, more than a functioning food system. Every month you're still at the grocery store watching the total climb. The USDA puts a family of 4 on a moderate plan at over $1,200 a month now. Meanwhile, your quarter acre, the most expensive thing you own, is growing grass. Grass you pay to mow, on land that could be feeding you instead. You didn't build a homestead. You built an expensive petting zoo with a salad bar attached. The grocery chain, the feed store, and the fertilizer aisle are all quietly thanking you for it. Hear this clearly. None of that is your fault. Nobody ever taught you to design land. They taught you to decorate it. The coop goes where it's easy to build, not where it works with everything else. The garden goes where the sun happens to hit, disconnected from the rest of the plan. The compost goes wherever your spouse can't see it from the kitchen window. Every decision made sense on its own, and none of them connect to each other. That's not laziness. That's the model inherited from an industry that profits from disconnection. If your chickens fed themselves off your garden, the feed company loses a customer. If your compost fed your beds, the fertilizer company loses one too. Disconnected homesteads are very profitable, just not for you. Once you see that pattern, you can't unsee it. It wasn't always this way. Before World War II, bagged animal feed as we know it barely existed. Small farmers across America and Europe ran flocks and kitchen plots entirely on what the land produced. Chickens cleaning garden beds, rabbits eating weeds and cuttings, every scrap cycled back into the soil. French market gardeners of the 1800s famously fed Paris from plots measured in fractions of an acre. They used intensive beds and manure hauled straight off the city streets. The Amish never got the memo that you need 100 acres to produce real food. Many of their most productive kitchen gardens would fit inside a suburban backyard. This knowledge wasn't lost because it stopped working. It was buried because it stopped being profitable to teach. Today, we're digging it back up, 5 systems at a time. System 1 is the function map, the plan before a single bird or bed exists. Before you buy anything, answer one question. How many steps from your kitchen door to your most visited daily chore? If it's more than 50 steps, your layout is bleeding you. Not just time, motivation. The willingness to walk out there in February. So, we zone the quarter acre by function, not by convenience. Zone 1 is the intensive garden. 400 to 600 square feet of raised beds within 50 feet of the kitchen door. Things you see daily get tended daily. That's the whole logic behind the distance. Zone 2 is perennials and dwarf fruit trees ringing the garden. 3 to 5 trees on dwarf rootstock, each mature tree dropping 40 to 60 pounds of fruit from about 30 square feet of canopy. Zone 3 is animal housing along the back fence, uphill of the garden if there's any slope at all. Manure and runoff should flow toward your beds. not away from them. Gravity is free infrastructure. Use it. Zone 4 is compost and worm bins sitting between the animals and the garden. That's the crossing guard of the whole operation, moving material from one zone to the next. On a quarter acre, you have zero room for wasted trips. On 20 acres, a dumb layout costs you exercise. On a quarter acre, it kills the closed loops that make everything else work. Sketch your own map this week, because a map only matters once you put something on it. System 2 is the chicken tractor loop, where your birds stop being an expense and start being employees. Between vegetable plantings, seed your empty beds with cover crops, crimson clover, annual rye, buckwheat. A bag of seed runs about $15 and covers every bed you own. Those crops grow fast, fix nitrogen, and smother weeds before they get a foothold. Then you roll a chicken tractor, a bottomless movable pen, right onto that bed. Built from 2x2s and hardware cloth for under $150. 4 to 6 hens go in, and for 2 to 3 weeks they do 4 jobs at once. Eat the cover crop, hunt every grub in the soil, scratch the surface into a fine seed bed, and spread manure evenly. No tilling, no fertilizer, no weeding. The chickens did it all while feeding themselves. A laying hen eats roughly a quarter pound of feed a day. Call it 90 pounds a year. Run this rotation spring through fall, and the birds forage a serious share of that themselves. A 50 to 70% feed cut in season is realistic with a well-run tractor rotation. 6 hens still hand you around 1,500 eggs a year on top of that savings. And yes, one of them will scream at you like you owe her money every time breakfast runs 5 minutes late. That's the tax. But the tractor loop has an off-season problem. Winter. Beds freeze, cover crops go dormant, and suddenly your employees want severance. Which is exactly why the next system doesn't touch the ground at all. System 3 is the vertical protein stack. On a quarter acre, you don't spread out, you stack up. Start with Coturnix quail. A 3-tier rack about 30 square feet, the size of a bookshelf. That rack houses 30 to 40 hens at the recommended 1 square foot per bird. Coturnix start laying at 6 to 8 weeks old. Not 6 months, 6 weeks. Each hen lays around 280 to 300 eggs a year on roughly half an ounce of feed a day. That one rack produces over 8,000 eggs annually from a footprint smaller than a closet. Pound for pound, quail make chickens look like they're on a government pension. Next to it, meat rabbits. 1 buck and 2 does in stacked hutches, 40 square feet tops. Each doe raises 4 to 5 litters of 6 to 8 kits per year. Each kit dresses out at 2.5 to 3 pounds by 10 to 12 weeks. That's 120 to 180 pounds of lean meat a year at a feed conversion around 3 to 1. Better than any pig or steer, you couldn't fit on this lot anyway. And rabbit manure is cold manure. It goes straight onto your beds with no composting. Instant fertility, 0 waiting period. Add the 6 hens from the tractor, and this back fence line under 200 square feet produces north of 9,000 eggs a year. Plus a freezer's worth of meat. That's the stack. But all these animals eat, and the whole point was firing the feed store. So where does the feed come from? From the ugliest, most ignored space on your property. System 4 is the perennial feed border. Walk your fence line right now and see what's growing there. Probably weeds, maybe a hose you lost in 2023. That strip of dead space is about to become a decade of free animal feed, and you only plant it once. 3 plants make up this system. First, comfrey, specifically the Bocking 14 variety, because it's sterile and stays where you put it. Comfrey sends roots deep enough to mine minerals other plants can't reach. The leaves come in around 20% protein by dry weight. One established plant can be cut 4 to 6 times a season and regrows like it's holding a grudge. It keeps producing for 20 years or more from a single planting. 10 plants along a fence line yield hundreds of pounds of fresh feed a year. Chickens eat it, rabbits demolish it. Nothing about comfrey goes to waste. Second, tree collards. A perennial green that grows 6 to 10 feet tall. It produces nutritious leaves for 5 to 10 years from a single planting. It shrugs off light frosts to feed your flock deep into fall when everything else has stopped. Third, Jerusalem artichokes. Sunchokes, your underground insurance policy. One 10 by 10 patch yields 50 to 100 pounds of starchy tubers that store themselves in the soil all winter. No root cellar, no spoilage. The ground does the storage work for free. In January, when the comfrey's asleep, you dig a bucket and your animals eat. Layer all three, and there's feed in every season from ground that was doing nothing. All for under $100, planted once. None of it, beds, birds, or border, actually closes the loop until you build the one zone nobody photographs. System 5 is the engine room, compost and worms. It's not glamorous. No compost bin has ever gone viral. But this corner turns 4 separate projects into one homestead. The build is simple. 3 pallet bins wired together. Most businesses will hand you pallets free just to be rid of them. Bin 1 is filling. Bin 2 is cooking. Bin 3 is finished. Every coop dropping, every bedding change, every kitchen scrap and garden trimming goes in bin 1. A properly built pile heats to 130 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to kill weed seeds and pathogens. It hands you finished compost in 2 to 4 months. A small flock plus household waste produces well over a cubic yard of the stuff a year. Bagged at the garden center, that's $100 or more. Yours is free and it's better. Next to the bins, a worm farm, a plastic tote with drainage holes, shredded cardboard, and a pound of red wigglers. About $50 all in, and it parks right under the rabbit hutches. The manure drops straight through the wire, and the worms handle the rest. Red wigglers process roughly half their body weight in waste every single day. They turn it into castings, the richest plant-available fertilizer you can get without a chemistry degree. Now, watch the loop close. Compost becomes soil, soil grows food, and cover crops. Those feed your family and your animals. The animals make manure. The manure comes right back here. Nothing leaves the property. Nothing gets bought. That's not a collection of projects anymore. That's a system. I didn't start as a believer. My first year on a small lot, I did everything I just told you not to do. Coop in the far corner, because that's where it fit. Garden by the driveway because the soil looked easy. Compost pile behind the shed, which is a polite way of saying I had a garbage pile behind the shed. I kept receipts, which was a mistake, because at the end of that year they told the truth. Just over $600 on feed, about $180 on fertilizer and amendments. A garden that produced, by my own generous math, maybe $400 worth of vegetables. I was paying for the privilege of working weekends. The redesign took 1 off-season to complete. Beds moved to 40 feet from the kitchen door, tractor built, 12 comfrey crowns, and a sunchoke patch in the ground. Pallet bins and a worm tote went in by the fence. Total cost around $450, less than I'd spent on feed the year before. 18 months later, the numbers had flipped completely. Feed spending down to about $15 a month. A small grain supplement for deep winter, that's it. Fertilizer spending, $0 2 years running. Eggs went from some to more than we could eat, and the freezer had rabbit in it for the first time. It wasn't effortless. I lost a bed of seedlings learning to time the tractor, and the quail rack took 3 tries. But the day I realized I hadn't seen the inside of a feed store in 4 months, that's when I became a convert. Let me save you from the mistakes that wreck most quarter-acre plans, including the big one I promised. Mistake 1 is free-ranging. It feels right. It looks like the videos, and on a quarter-acre, it will destroy everything. Stripped seedlings, cratered beds, a lawn like the surface of the moon. The fix is managed movement. Tractors and rotations give the birds everything free-ranging promises without the crime scene. Mistake 2 is buying every animal in the same season. Chickens, quail, rabbits, and heaven help you a goat all at once means learning 4 systems badly instead of 1 system well. The fix: 1 species per season. Master it, connect it, then add the next. Mistake 3 is skipping the engine room because it's boring. No compost system means manure piles up as a problem instead of cycling back as fertility. By year 2, your beds are tired and you're back in the fertilizer aisle. Build Zone 4 first. Yes, first before the animals. Mistake 4 is the killer. Trying to build everything at once. This ends more small homesteads than every predator combined. You watch a video like this, get fired up, and launch 5 systems in one weekend. By June, you're exhausted, half of it's unfinished, and you conclude the land was too small. The land was fine, the sequence was wrong. 1 system a month, in the order given to you, is the pace that finishes. Now picture your quarter acre, 18 months from now, a Tuesday morning in October. You step out the kitchen door with a bowl of scraps, and 40 steps later, they're in the worm bin. The tractor sits on a bed the hens have scratched clean and manured flat. Tomorrow, you slide it over and plant garlic behind them. You pull a handful of comfrey off the fence line, and the rabbits are eating before you turn around. The quail rack hands you a dozen speckled eggs the size of chocolates and twice as valuable. Total chore time, 25 minutes. You didn't drive anywhere. You didn't haul anything farther than 50 steps. And here's the part you'll feel in your chest. The feed bill isn't lower, it's gone. Not reduced, gone, except 1 sack of winter grain that costs less than a pizza. January doesn't scare you anymore. Empty shelf headlines don't scare you anymore. You'll stand there with coffee going cold in your hand, looking at 2 basketball courts worth of land, feeding your family, and realize the 20 acres you thought you needed was never the missing piece. The design was, you don't need more land. You need land that's connected. Your quarter acre is enough. Now go build something that feeds you. A quarter acre with zoned design consistently outproduces an unplanned 5-acre lot in usable food per hour of labor invested. The distance between your kitchen door and your most visited chore is the single biggest predictor of whether a homestead survives its first winter. Cover crop seed for chicken tractor rotation stores for years in a cool, dry place, so buying in bulk once saves money every season after. A chicken tractor moved every 2 to 3 weeks keeps the birds working fresh ground instead of scratching the same patch bare. Coturnix quail reaching laying age in 6 weeks means a rack started in spring is producing eggs before most chicken flocks even mature. Rabbit does bred on a staggered schedule, ensure kits are weaning and reaching harvest weight in a continuous rolling cycle all year. Bocking 14 comfrey was specifically bred to be sterile, which means it spreads only where you plant root cuttings, never as an invasive weed. Tree collards propagate from cuttings rather than seed, so one plant shared among neighbors can seed an entire street with free perennial greens. A worm bin positioned under rabbit hutches processes manure on contact, turning a daily chore into a passive system that runs itself. The 3-bin compost rotation means there is always a batch finishing while a new batch is just starting, with no gap in supply. Every one of these 5 systems was chosen specifically because its waste becomes the next system's input, closing the loop completely. A homestead where every zone talks to the next zone spends less money every single year instead of more, which is the opposite of most farms. Zone placement matters more on small lots than on large ones, because there is no spare land to absorb an inefficient layout. A raised bed within sight of the kitchen window gets weeded in passing. A bed at the far end of the yard gets forgotten by August. Dwarf fruit trees on quarter-acre lots typically start bearing within 2 to 3 years, instead of the 5 to 7 years full-size trees need. A single mature dwarf apple tree can supply enough fruit for a family of 4 to eat fresh and preserve some for winter. Uphill animal housing is a one-time site decision that pays back every single week for the entire life of the homestead. The chicken tractor rotation and the vertical quail and rabbit stack were designed to run on completely different schedules on purpose. That way, one system is always producing even when the other is between cycles, smoothing out the household food supply year-round. Feed border plants were chosen specifically because none of them need replanting, which means the labor cost drops to 0 after year 1. A properly hot compost pile is doing more than recycling waste. It is sterilizing weed seeds that would otherwise spread across every bed. The worm bin under the rabbit hutches is the single cheapest piece of infrastructure on this entire quarter acre, at under $50 total. Every dollar not spent on feed or fertilizer is a dollar that stays in the household instead of leaving for the feed store every month. Most homesteading advice online assumes acreage nobody watching actually has, which is exactly why so many people give up before starting. A well-designed quarter acre produces a genuinely surprising amount of food once every zone is placed with intention instead of convenience. The kitchen door test works for any size property. The closer the daily chore, the more consistently it actually gets done. Cover crops planted between chicken tractor rotations cost pennies per square foot and prevent the bare dirt that invites weeds back in. A bottomless chicken tractor built once from scrap lumber can be repaired and reused for a decade with almost no ongoing cost. Quail eggs are roughly a third the size of chicken eggs, but 3 of them match the nutrition of one chicken egg almost exactly. A rabbit doe bred every 6 to 8 weeks on a sustainable schedule produces meat reliably, without overtaxing her body condition. Comfrey cuttings planted 18 inches apart along a fence line fill in completely within one full growing season. Jerusalem artichokes left undisturbed in the ground will spread slowly on their own, expanding the patch size for free every year. A finished compost pile smells like forest floor, not garbage. That transformation is the clearest sign the system is working correctly. Red wiggler worms sold locally by other homesteaders are often cheaper and healthier than worms shipped long distance through the mail. The entire 5-system homestead described here was built for well under $1,000 total, spread across 18 months of work. None of these 5 systems require specialized skills. They require sequence, patience, and a willingness to start with just one. Start this month with just System 1. Draw the map, walk the distances, and mark where every zone will eventually sit. Add System 2 next month once the map is drawn. Then let each following system build on the foundation already in place. By month 5, all 5 systems are running together as one connected machine instead of 5 separate weekend projects. That sequence, one system at a time, is the difference between a homestead that finishes and one that gets abandoned by June. 2 basketball courts of land, designed with intention, will consistently outproduce 20 acres designed with none. That is the entire promise of this 5-system quarter-acre design, proven and repeatable.